It's lucky because they're not that bright, so it's like it's pretty easy to do. So we got it worked out in that way. So I like that you brought up the racist thing, because this is something that I've been saying for a long time, is that unfortunately a lot of people on our side of the aisle, they will default to, well, this guy's a racist, right? It's like, okay, yeah, but let's be logical here.
Yeah.
You can be right and still be racist. Like you can't. Right. Like that just because you're a racist doesn't mean you're wrong about everything. That is a horrible argument. Now you can if you want to say that, hey, this is racist and it harms people, okay, there you go. That's the argument you're going with. But just saying, well, he's a racist, that's not going to get you anywhere, especially when the person you're debating doesn't think the other person's a racist. And bad arguments. I have one. I just thought of one when you were talking about this. This is the gun control argument that I see liberals use a lot, and they'll say, yeah, so the Second Amendment exists, and it says you have the right to bear arms, but you have to keep in mind back in 1789, it took 10 minutes to load a musket.
Love that one.
Like, it's like the guns have evolved so much that we can't really bank on this. I was like, okay, look, all right, if that's the case, you have to look at the First Amendment too, because when the First Amendment was around, it would take you 3 weeks to send a letter across the state. So should we get rid of the first? Like, that's a terrible fucking argument. But
it really is.
It's
because
awful. It's shocking.
But on rhetoric grounds, it's really interesting. So like, when you're marching through like a protest or something like that, these things hit. Right. But they don't hit like in a debate. Like I remember this. I don't know if you've seen this commercial. It kind of hits on what you were talking about, where this guy, the shooter, he goes into like his old workplace and he, caps one person and then everybody starts running away. But it turns out he had like a musket. So he was like reloading it for like 18. It was really funny. It was really, I'm like, okay, that's going to move a couple people. It's a terrible argument.
It's terrible. So bad.
Yeah, man.
God, yeah, I hate seeing that, and so they. It's funny. I never really thought about that's why I go into these. It wasn't my motivating factor, but it does bother me when I see shitty arguments. I'm like, look, you're right, and this is just like, and people try. You know what? Speaking on gun control, here's another one. It's not a bad argument, but it's an ineffective one if you really think about it, because the assault rifle argument and everything. It's like high capacity magazines and stuff. We shouldn't allow that. And I agree. I don't think that's a good idea. But unfortunately, that's what people tend to focus on. They focus on the the mass shootings because they're more visceral. They hit harder. But it's like they account for like 1% of the gun deaths in the country. It's like, if you really want to tackle this issue, you got to go way beyond that. And and once again, I do get why this motivates people, because you hear about 20 children getting killed. And you're like, okay, we got to do something to stop that. And we do, but it's a lot bigger than that. And if you just let's say that let's say they got rid of the assault weapons ban and everything, you would still be left with like 95% of all the gun deaths. And
what do you got to do about like the guy who has like a history of domestic violence, who ends up, taking that violence out on somebody else, and these people that like have maybe like some sort of mental health issues, who's taking that on one, maybe two people. That's something that doesn't hit the news. That's something that's not trending on Twitter. You know what I mean? So it's just,
like, 40 guys this month shot their wives or girlfriends or whatever. That's not making the news. Like, it's not like those individual cases. It's just not going to. And the only solace that we have in this is that the Republican arguments are even worse. Is that they're somehow even worse than our bad ones. My favorite one is them talking about, we need to make these hard targets. We need to make sure that there are, armed guards outside the school, razor wire, metal detector,
landmines,
infrared cameras and everything. And it's like, okay, so your solution is to turn every school, every gas station, every mall, every convenience store, every supermarket into a fortress. Like, that's your solution. Like that's freedom. Like that's freedom for you guys right there. It's like turning everything into this war zone. And it's like, that doesn't make any sense, but it's absurd. Like it's absolutely absurd, and it's just wild how often people rely on this. And that's the only thing saving them is that their arguments are somehow way worse than ours.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, they I mainly heard them talking about the basically turning these schools into basically a military base. I'm like, okay, what would happen? Okay, let me put myself in that shoe, because I always try to steal man, right? And they don't warrant it. They don't warrant it, but I still try to steal it. I'm like, okay, let's see. I'm a school shooter, and I see giant, robots, walking around the school. Am I gonna shoot up that school? No. Okay, now I'm gonna go to the mall. So what do? Now you put a fortress around the mall. Okay, now I don't want to go to the mall. Now I want to go to this I don't know, Miley Cyrus festival. What do? Do you is this all of society now? At some point we do have to address the issue.
Yeah, it is. The absurdity of this also hit me once when I was in Washington D.C. and I was at the Smithsonian. And at the Smithsonian, there's like several different, museums to go through. And there's the Smithsonian, and there were 3 of them that I remember. And there was a metal detector before you can go in, check see if any firearms. But so many people wanted to go in that the line for the metal detector was way out the door, like 50, 60 people for each line. And I said, okay, if I had a firearm, these people are sitting ducks. Like they're sitting ducks right here. This does not solve the problem at all. And it's weird. The military. I'm glad you brought this up. So I was surprised to find out that you were in the military as well.
Yeah.
I like bringing up the military because one of the arguments that they like to use is, well, we give 17-year-olds guns in the military. Why can't we? And it's like, okay, first of all, fuck you. That's a dumbass argument. Second, sure, we give 17-year-olds firearms in the military. But let me tell you how this shit works. You show up to basic training. You spend 3 weeks being taught in a classroom everything about this firearm. You're taught what it looks like. You're taught the components. You're taught how to control your breathing. You're taught how to assemble it. And it's like 4 weeks before you ever touch a real rifle. And then when you do, you go, like, you don't carry it around with you everywhere. You lock it up in the arms room, and you only fire it when you're being watched like a hawk by your sergeant to make sure that you're doing this properly. And then they train you for 3 more weeks on that. That is not what you guys are advocating for. You're advocating for any 17-year-old or 18-year-old anywhere, just go out and buy the firearm and do whatever they want. And furthermore, when you're on a military base, you're active duty or whatever, you're living on post, or you're just on post at all. Guess what? You don't have your firearm there either. You don't. Like, when you're living in the barracks, you are not allowed to just have, because the military knows that would be insane. You do not give a bunch of 20-year-olds who are drinking all the time and emotionally unstable and getting in fights and let them have handguns in their room. That's a recipe for disaster, but that's what you guys are arguing for. So yeah, it's a shitty argument, but they don't know how the military works, and they try to use that to their advantage.
And interesting story on that. So I went to basic training, it was right during COVID. So early 2021 when I went in.
Terrible.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. We even had we had our yellow phase. So we had to stay in quarantine 2 weeks before we had to start basic training at the barracks. It was terrible. It was terrible. But anyway, so you might have heard in 2021, there was this case of this military member. He took like a bus, and then, he conducted like a shooting. That was while I was in basic training. And so before that happened, we had the weapons on a rack, and they were all like tied up with a very strong cable when inside of the barracks, right? Made sure that nobody can get in. Drill sergeants would come in and all that good stuff, right? After that happened, they took all the weapons, and so now every time we're about to go out to the range, or that we're about to go out to the FTX, they would put them all the way at this vault on the other side of on the other side of the barracks, pretty far away from the barracks. So now we have to march in cadence all the way over there, get our weapons, clear them and all that stuff. So like, even that, just like small things like that as a response to a shooting another state away, that's not something that they're advocating for. And that I agree with you there.
Yeah, it's nonsense. And the mental health stuff too, this is also very annoying, is that whenever this happens, they always say, well, the problem is mental health. That's the issue. The problem isn't firearms, the problem is mental health. And then you guys ask the obvious question, okay, why is the mental health in the United States so much worse than everybody else? Because if that's the actual issue, we should, not see the data that we do see, that we have all these firearm deaths, and it's a lot lower pretty much in everywhere else on planet Earth. And second, okay, what do we plan to do about this mental health? Like, what's your solution here? Because I'm not hearing anything saying, oh, well, we need to fund universal healthcare so people can get the mental health they need. It's just a distraction. And they're like ammosexuals. Like, they're in love with firearms. And I don't get why. Say what?
I'm using that one.
I just don't get why. Like, they have this libidinal, like, sexual
the culture
desire
behind it. I don't know what it is.
I don't either. I really, because look, and I will say this. All right, this is something that libs get wrong, is that a lot of liberals are, some leftists too, they don't grow up around firearms. They don't know anything about them, and they're bizarre, and so they just see the danger they cause, and they can't understand why anyone would want one. And listen, you guys got to understand this. Guns are really fun and really cool. Like, they are. Like, you're holding a small cannon in your hand. That's incredible. And so they are really fun. So liberals can't understand that, but you still have to like make some sort of rules around this shit. You can't just let people do whatever they want. And it's really disgusting too, like with the NRA, because they don't care about like the Second Amendment, whatever. It's all about selling weapons. And that's just, it's depressing to see. I don't know how this is going to be solved. I really don't. I don't foresee. What's your opinion on this? Like, do you foresee this coming to any sort of conclusion anytime soon?
I don't, because it's so secured inside of the Second Amendment that you would need some sort of massive reinterpretation of the Second Amendment, which I don't think is going to happen with this current Supreme Court. And you could theoretically try to get around it. I know Gavin Newsom tried to do it with weapons the same way Texas tried to get around with abortions, where it's not necessarily the state that's going after you, it's your citizens around. I'm not sure exactly how that turned out, but I haven't seen any arguments against that, how that wouldn't apply. It's very difficult because the interpretation is so one-sided on the Second Amendment. I don't see it changing anytime soon. And the problem with the arguments is, like, it always reverts. I'm like, as a debater, I always say, well, that's an appeal to legality. It's our constitutional right. It is. Should it be? That's the question I try to bring them down to. Should we change some aspects of the Second Amendment? They never can engage with that question, because it's like the Second Amendment is like a Bible. The Constitution is like the Bible, except the First Amendment and the 14th Amendment. So like it's very difficult to engage them in that conversation. So whoever's part of that conversation about changing or altering or changing the interpretation, they're not going to be at the room when that happens. That's what I foresee.
Yeah. Also, I think another problem is that there's just so many weapons in the country. There's just so many. Even if you were to change the laws on this, there's more guns than people. I mean, even if like there was like a steady plan to actually solve this problem, it would take decades before we could actually, see some solid results from it. And that is kind of sad. And my man, I love that you brought up this appeal to legality, because I talk about this shit all the time. Every time like a discussion comes up about anything, but like let's stick with the Second Amendment, and I'll get like someone will comment or message, like they'll just put in quotes, "shall not be infringed," as if that's some sort of bulletproof argument they got going there. And here's the thing. I do not care what James Madison said. I don't. And quite frankly, it's very weird that you do. It's super odd. Like James Madison was born 300 years ago. He has like, why would you expect him to have like all the answers for everything that that existed centuries after his birth and his death? It's like it's odd. Like these people, like you said, they act like it's the Bible. They pretend that the founding fathers were there. You know, they weren't quite gods, but certainly more than men. And we need, and they had all the answers for everything. They wrote in the Constitution, and we have no choice but to follow it. Who are we to question them? It's like, yeah, I think it's perfectly okay to question the words written by a guy who would be mystified by a dishwasher. I think we would be fine doing that. There's no.
Well, we have the average 14-year-old in the United States who is currently more knowledgeable than all of the founding fathers.
Yes.
Yeah, like that's insane.
Yeah. And I don't know. It's just so bizarre. But you know what? It's actually not that bizarre, because I say this all the time about the American education system, that if you go through the American education system in a regular school, you know, not a wild, batshit insane school, and you're taught, you know, American history and civics and stuff, you will come out pretty conservative. Like you will, like, because what do they teach you? Like they teach you that the United States is the greatest nation that's ever existed. You know, our rights are. We live under a republic that is what is it? To the representatives, it's a nation that operates under the auspices of capital G God. And now this is we are the pride of the world, the shining city on the hill, and these great men in powdered wigs were the most brilliant men of the time. And sure, they made some mistakes. They may have had a slave or two, but you know, their hearts were in the right place. And you grow up being taught that 24/7. Of course, you're not going to question them. Of course, you're not going to. Why would you? And so it's absurd that people do that, but it happens all the time. And